Good afternoon. This is Patrick Gannon, President and Executive Director for SGIP. If you'll please stand by, we'll be starting our webinar in about 3 minutes. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Smart Grid Interoperability Panel, update to members and the Smart Grid community. I'm Patrick Gannon, the President and Executive Director for SGIP, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. I want to remind you that as we go through the presentation, we'll be having places to stop for question and answers. So you're invited to enter your questions into the GoToWebinar pop-out viewer there where you can enter your questions, and then we'll take those up at regular scheduled times at the end of each of the presentations there. Our program today is focused on you, our members, and on the many activities in which you are engaged. as well as the accomplishments that you've been achieving through working together in a collaborative environment. We will begin today with an opening welcoming remarks by John McDonnell, our Chairman of the Board, and then some comments from Chris Greer of the NIST Smart Program Office. I'll then give a brief overview of our organization and then lead into the presentation by John Caskey, who's our Vice Chairman of the SGIP Board, as he goes through and gives you an update on all of our technical accomplishments. We'll then follow up with an overview of 8 areas of opportunities for members to be even more engaged, and that will be led by Tariq Samad. We'll then follow up with a final question and answer for any of the panelists that were not specific for each of the sections as we go through there. So to begin our presentations today, I would like to welcome John McDonnell, who is the Director of Technical Strategy and Policy Development for GE Energy's digital energy business. John has over 39 years of experience in the electric utility, transmission, and distribution industry. John was elected to chair the original NIST-sponsored Smart Grid Interoperability Panel governing board from 2010 to 2012, and then was elected as chairman of the new SGIP Board of Directors for 2013 and 2014. John also serves on the SGIP Executive Committee. John?
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. I also want to welcome everyone to the webinar today, and just give a few welcoming remarks here before we get into the rest of the material. First of all, on the organizational status, you know, as Patrick said, we, you know, the original SGIP, the NIST group formed. We had our first board meeting in late 2009, and we spent 2010, 2011, and 2012, you know, working hard and fulfilling the mission of that original group. But, you know, last year, January of last year, we began putting a business sustainment plan together to transition to the model that we have now. July of 2012, we formed the new 501c3 organization, and really for the last 5 months of last year, you know, running both organizations in parallel and doing our best to really start up this new organization. But, you know, really in terms of devoting our full-time resources to the new organization, really didn't occur till January 1st, when we focused all our energies on the new member-funded model. So I want to emphasize here for all of you that, you know, phase 1 is really building the foundation, as we can see on the slide. And I think back to early 2010 rather, when we were building the foundation for the original NIST SGIP. And it took time to get the governance in place and to really get, you know, to get the foundation in place that we could begin in earnest, you know, the technical activities that we all knew was the core of what we needed to do. So very similarly, we've had a phase 1 here in building the foundation. One of the differences here is key people on board, people like Patrick as the executive director, Susan, director of technical operations, and now Blaine with membership and marketing. Also contracted services and tools to bring on board. And it's been a learning curve for new people, for the contractors and members. A lot of our efforts have been focused in that area. You know, we're now operating in phase 2, which is operating the machinery. It's, you know, the work management expectations that we have. and entering early stages and from both members and previous NIST SGIP members too. And then lastly would be the future direction and activities, and working with the members and deciding, future direction and activity ideas for SGIP. The next slide. So from my point of view with the board and with SGIP, areas of emphasis. I mean, one, I want to focus on three. Technical activities obviously is first and foremost are the core of what we're about. And what's important with our technical activities is we provide relevance in several areas. Relevance to the individuals participating, relevance to the individual's organizations, and relevance to the industry. And along with relevance is value. Right? We're providing value in all three of those areas too. And specifically, it's looking at what new priority action plans are needed, and Tariq will be addressing that here later in this webinar. The project management office. We had an office previously. We had some PAPs and some documents that went through the procedures of the PMO, but yet we ended up with a deliverable that didn't have the full consensus in some cases of all the stakeholders. So we want to make sure we better align the procedures of the PMO with having final deliverable, final output that truly has relevance for the industry. And John Caskey and Susan will talk about that, as well as the catalog of standards process. Second would be the Smart Grid Implementation Methods Committee. EEI, particularly in our investor-owned utility members, wanted to make sure that we had a focus on implementation and providing desired information to not just their stakeholder category, but really to all members. What's important here, particularly with this committee, is we have active electric utility leadership and participation, because the value here is in many areas. Implementing equipment with standards incorporated. What's the best practices? What are the lessons learned? What's our experience? What about testing? The business cases that we put together, and the transition from legacy equipment to the new equipment that we've installed. So there's a lot of potential areas of information here that we want to focus on. And then third is the international activities. We have existing collaboration agreements with Korea, European Union, Japan, Ecuador, and Colombia. There's a lot of interest from other international organizations to have agreements with us. But what's important here is with this International Activities Committee is that we have active leadership and particularly active participation. There's so much we can do here, but we need members to participate and take an active role. And that's an area that we've talked about a lot, but we're limited to how much we can accomplish here until we get a good core group of folks that can help us with the international activities. So it's an exciting time. There's a lot that we've done to lay the foundation and beginnings of the new member-funded organization, and there's so much more that we want to do and can do, and a lot to talk about today. And to get into that, then I'll turn things back over to Patrick for the next agenda item.
Thank you very much, John. And again, thank you for your continued strong leadership. It's been really great to see the organization continue to grow under your leadership with the board of directors here. So next on the agenda will be Chris Greer. And let me make sure we have Chris on the voice here. Chris, are you?
I may be muted. There we are.
Yes. Okay.
Very good.
So let me introduce Chris Greer was just announced a couple months ago as the new director of the Smart Grid Cyber Physical Systems Program Office. And in that role, he'll also hold the title of National Coordinator for Smart Grid Interoperability. These positions were previously held by Dr. George Arnold, who earlier this year was promoted to the position of Director of NIST Standards and Coordination Office. So Dr. Greer brings with experience from academia, National Science Foundation, White House, and NIST. We're glad to have Chris in this role working directly with us here. So Chris, please go ahead with your comments.
All right, thank you, Patrick. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, very good. So it's very much a pleasure to join this group today. This is the first opportunity for me to talk to you, but not the last, and it's only virtually. So there'll be more, and I'm looking forward to meeting all of you in person at some point. As Patrick emphasized, my background is in information technology. So here at NIST, I was previously in charge of our advanced networking division, where we worked on mobile communications, including public safety networks, and on internet infrastructure. Also director of the cloud computing program, responsible for promoting cloud computing across the federal government, and finally responsible for strategic planning for the IT portfolio for our information technology laboratory. So those are the positions I held at NIST prior to moving to the Smart Grid and Cyber Physical Systems Office. Before NIST, I was at the White House in the Office of Science and Technology Policy, where I was Assistant Director for Information Technology Research and Development, and also Cybersecurity Liaison to the National Security staff. So my experience in IT means that I have a strong interest in the IT components of Smart Grid, but my portfolio includes all areas of cyber physical systems, including areas like transportation, advanced manufacturing, and others. Of course, Smart Grid is one of the highest priority elements in that portfolio. And Dave Woolman, who is my deputy, is familiar to all of you. He'll continue in the remarkable leadership role that he's played in the past, and I rely on him for advice, guidance, and good judgment in the area of Smart Grid. So turning to looking forward, first I want to make sure I reiterate our support for the SGIP process. We operate in a consensus mode here at NIST, working actively with all of you with interests across the private sector and the government sector as well. And the SGIP organization provides an excellent venue for having those consensus discussions and working together. We've worked with the SGIP staff and volunteers throughout this process of transition to a nonprofit status, and are actively working to keep the critical technical work that the SGIP is doing to continue moving forward. Our team members from NIST are continue in key positions in the priority action plans, in the DUGs, and the standing committees. Examples are the Cybersecurity Committee and the Testing and Certification Group Vice Chair, and so on. So we're deeply involved and find this an effective way to pursue one element of our consensus effort. Looking forward, in October, we expect to release for public comments the draft of version 3.0 of the NIST framework and roadmap for Smart Grid Interoperability Standards. This release updates and represents our ongoing efforts at facilitating standards development and smart grid related measurement science, including this continuing interaction with SGIP. The framework will describe a variety of major deliverables that have been produced in the areas of smart grid architecture, cybersecurity, and in testing and certification. And the examples are the development of a common architecture that comprises the original NIST conceptual domain architecture EU M490, IEC 62357, and the combined reference model. It'll also describe NIST IR 7628 User's Guide, which facilitates use of 7628, the cybersecurity guidelines, and description of NIST IR 7823 Advanced Metering Infrastructure. It will expand the section on testing and certification with some more emphasis on the acceleration of new test program development. It also updates the list of identified smart grid standards and list of standards subject to further review. Additional smart grid standards that emerge from the various PAPs that have filled some of the gaps that were identified in Release 2.0 have been added to this to the list of the identified standards. So look for that release in October, and we hope you will take a look at that and provide us with comments. And in particular, we expect to be holding sessions at the SGIP annual meeting in November that will focus on your feedback on the framework. And we hope you'll have a chance to take a look at that, provide your input and thoughts, and we encourage all SGIP members and non-members to attend and participate in those sessions. As the framework will already have been out for comment, we hope that we can add items of real substance and move that document forward. So that gives you a look at the next several months, exciting times. I'm looking forward to meeting many of you at the meeting in November and other opportunities, and continuing to participate in the SGIP activities. So that gives you a general sense. Why don't I turn it back over to Patrick now so he can continue with the session.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gere. We appreciate you taking some time to come on the program here. Yes, so we do want to move forward with the program and get into the technical activities. Just as a way to be sure to orient people, while we have mostly members here on the webinar, we have a number of non-members that are joining us for the first time here. So just want to emphasize that our organization today has over 200 paid members, and of those, 76% of them have joined as participating members versus observing members. So we're really proud of that. And to kind of emphasize our role in the smart grid ecosystem community, SGIP is functioning in a way to provide a framework for orchestrating all smart grid stakeholders to accelerate standards harmonization and interoperability. And we have found that this idea of an orchestra with all the different players coming together to create harmonized output is really the highlight of what we're about. And we do that through the valued participation of our members. And this is really where the work is getting done, through all of these different areas, through our domain expert working groups, through our priority action plan teams, and then our standing member committees, and producing a wide variety of work products all the way from conceptual models, customer requirements, use cases, white papers, the standards evaluations that are done as part of the process of evaluating standards before they go into the catalog, and then the ultimate catalog of standards that gets published. So this is a range of committees and groups that we have that our members are active in, and so what we're going to do this afternoon is to go through this in a little more detail and take you into what's the current status for a variety of these activities. And so to do that, we've asked John Katsky to lead us through this. John is the Assistant Vice President of Industry Operations for the National Electrical Manufacturers Association, and he has served as the Category 18 Board Director since its creation, and also serves as Vice Chair of the SGIP Board of Directors. He's a member of our Executive Committee, but most importantly, where he puts in the huge amount of time that we're so grateful for, is as Chair of our Technical Committee. So John, if you would please take us through this process here and give us the details.
Thank you, Patrick, for that introduction. I appreciate that. And as we were looking at the picture of the orchestra, I have to say that I've never been an orchestra director, but I was actually the president of the music boosters for my kids' high school. And then I also drove the truck with all the band equipment in it. So I'm sort of the guy that tries to make sure that the job gets done and make sure that all the equipment is in the right place at the right time. So with that in mind, what I want to share with you today is some information about the technical activities that are going on within the SGIP. So the current focus of a lot of this technical work deals with providing the direction and the resources necessary to keep this catalog of standards reviews on track. So this catalog of standards is a key component of what the SGIP is all about. In addition, we oversee the 4 standing committees, and we'll talk about them a little bit later. And one of the other objectives is to ensure that the Program Management Office works effectively. And I have a slide in a few minutes talking about the Program Management Office. And then also to closely track all the work of the Domain Expert Working Groups, the DOOGs, as well as the Priority Action Plans, the PAPs, and to help to keep them on schedule. And finally, the idea here is to identify and prioritize the candidate projects for the PAP pipeline or the DOOGs or other technical work, and this is something that Tariq is going to touch on when I'm done. But I really want to focus quite a bit on the catalog of standards in just a minute, and really say that that's our goal is the SGIP is really driving this implementation of interoperable systems, and in order to accomplish that, we really need to remain dedicated to expanding and maintaining the catalog of standards. So you'll hear quite a bit about that. So these sort of bullets that are in front of you now will essentially serve as like an outline of what I'm going to discuss for the rest of my presentation. So the catalog of standards is really a compendium of standards and practices. Not everything in there is going to be a legitimate standard. It may be a practice, it may be a guideline, maybe some other document. But all of these documents are considered to be relevant for the development and deployment of a robust, interoperable, and secure smart grid. So all standard and practice and guidelines in the catalog have gone through very rigorous review by industry experts before they actually make it to this catalog of standards. So it should be noted that in some cases, there may be multiple standards that exist in the catalog that address essentially the same capabilities. And in addition, that the standards that are out there that are included in the catalog are not necessarily perfect. There may be some that require additional upgrading dealing with cybersecurity aspects or some other aspects of the standard. Patrick, you can go on to the next. Okay, so basically the status is that there are hundreds of standards have been considered for inclusion in the SGIP catalog of standards. And currently there are 56 entries listed in the catalog of standards. And at the bottom of this slide you can actually see the link to go to the catalog of standards if you want to review that. But we do anticipate having several more items added to the catalog of standards later this year. We have about 50 standards that are really on our queue to be evaluated, and we're constantly reprioritizing them to make sure that we've got the most important ones next in the queue. And to let you know, we do prioritize the documents that are coming out as a result of a priority action plan do get bumped up in priority as soon as they are completed from that PAP. In addition, we have a list of about 160 additional standards that as we work through some of these 50 that we say are in the queue, then we'll start blending in some of these other ones that are sort of waiting in the wings. You can go to the next slide. So one of the things that the technical committee does is oversee 4 standing member committees. So they include the architecture committee, the cybersecurity committee, the implementation methods committee, and the testing and certification committee. So I'll talk about, over the next couple of minutes, I'll talk about each of these in a little more detail. So go ahead to the next slide. So the Smart Grid Architecture Committee is actively participating with EU M490 methodology and interoperability work package to coordinate architecture. And the cybersecurity, or excuse me, and the architecture committee has been very influential in evaluating the candidates for the catalog of standards. And these are some of the candidates that they completed the reviews on fairly recently, including Powerline Communication Transceiver, the OPC Unified Architecture Specification, demand response work, as well as the Smart Energy Profile 2.0. So I'm sort of following up on what John McDonald said, we've got an awful lot of work to do out there. Certainly the architecture committee is doing a lot of work, and we certainly look for additional volunteers if anybody's able to help with the review of these documents, as well as to coordinate some of the other cybersecurity or the architecture work. So next is cybersecurity, and one of the key things that this group did complete was this user's guide for the NIST 7628, which is the guidelines for Smart Grid cybersecurity. In addition to that, this cybersecurity committee has been the model. They've been sort of at the cutting edge of trying to help us identify what is the best way to move forward some of this work, and the cybersecurity group completed this roadmap on privacy-related issues, as well as it identified how the various organizations out there interrelate with one another in the specific topic of privacy. So that served as a model, essentially, for some of the other roadmaps or sort of landscapes that we want to identify on how some of these various groups work together. They also completed this risk management case study, and they've been very active with several subgroups, and they've just coordinated an awful lot of the reviews of the cybersecurity work in preparation for the catalog of standards. John also mentioned the implementation aspect of Smart Grid. Certainly the Smart Grid Implementation Methods Committee is very important, particularly dealing with getting some electric utilities involved with that. That's, again, the rubber meets the road essentially where some of the documents that are included in the catalog of standards actually get adopted by various utilities and state corporation commissions, and we move them forward. So one of the best examples of this is Green Button, which is something that really had a lot of visibility through the White House. But I'm really recommending that we certainly need some help in this area, dealing with lessons learned and testing criteria and some other aspects. So certainly look forward to your help on some of these things. Next is Testing and Certification Committee. And this is another one of the key things where in order to move the standards forward, certainly there needs to be test requirements and other things prepared in order to make sure that different products within a particular category interoperate. So that is one of the driving forces behind the testing and certification. So their biggest output to date, I think, has been this interoperability process reference manual, and they released version 2, I want to say probably 6 months ago, something on that order. But again, they've been very active in trying to move forward all the work dealing with testing and certification, and they've developed this application review process for interoperability testing and certification authorities, which is referred to as ITCA. Go on to the next slide. So more important, particularly focused on 2013, is that the SGTCC has been very involved with education and outreach and has developed a plan for Smart Grid testing and certification advocacy, and is really trying to push the knowledge out there in terms of what needs to be done relative to testing and certification and how that helps to ensure interoperability. So that's what this group is really working about. And then at the bottom here it references that they've already collaborated in the creation of 8 testing programs and moving them forward. So now I'd like to touch on the Program Management Office, and this is something else that John McDonald had mentioned. So the things that we've done recently here is really essentially redesign how the Program Management Office functions, and we've actually created a Program Management Team. And that Program Management Team includes a Director of Technical Operations, who is Susan, as well as representatives from the Technical Committee, as well as representatives from NIST. And basically that team together is really helping to manage more or less the day-to-day work of all the technical activities within the SGIP. Another thing was this group got together and actually developed a charter and sort of a scope of what they should be involved with, and that was approved by the technical committee on July 25th. A couple other things the Program Management Office has done is, one, to develop this technical support funding request procedure and form. And that's really something that's to be used as a tool, so as various committees or PAPs or DUGs need some sort of technical assistance or consulting type facilitation, things like that, to move this work forward, they can identify that as a need, particularly if they do need any funding for that. And then that will come to the PMO for review, and then on to the technical committee for review to see if that's something that we want to get involved with, is funding that particular technical resource to help move the work forward. But certainly our first course is really to get members involved and to hopefully find volunteer members that are able to do that technical work to support the catalog of standards reviews and the other work. The second to the bottom bullet here talks about this invited technical expert procedure and form, and that's really related to, in some situations, a PAP reviewer or a catalog of standards review or something may require fairly high-level technical support, and we may not have that particular person as a member of the SGIP today. So this provides a vehicle for us to, on a temporary basis, to bring somebody in as an expert on a particular topic related to a PAP or a DUG or something, and utilize their knowledge even if they're not a member. But we are very much a member-driven organization, and we really are looking for those that are sort of paying to play, that those are the ones that are coming to the table and also doing the work. Also wanted to note that the Program Management Office is significantly increasing its communication and working relationships with the PAPs and the DUGs, and will be holding regular PAP and DUG leader meetings, and we've already started to set aside some time in the November face-to-face meeting for some additional communications to make sure that all of the PAP leaders and all the DUG leaders and the others are talking to one another and sharing their accomplishments and their successes. Next slide. So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and go into the DUGs, the Domain Expert Working Groups. And here are 7 listed, the Building to Grid DUG, the Industry to Grid DUG, Home to Grid, Vehicle to Grid, Business and Policy DUG, the T&D DUG, and then the Distributed Renewables Generation and Storage. And I'll talk about each of these fairly briefly. But these DUGs perform analysis of the standards interoperability for the SGIP, including PAP evaluation and support, and provide the strategic domain perspective on the evolution of the NIST Smart Grid Interoperability Framework, which is something that Chris had mentioned a few minutes ago also. So these DUGs really provide an environment where experts can come and discuss and analyze and understand the current architecture and the development and deployment issues, and help give guidance to the technical committee and the rest of the SGIP on those particular issues. So with the next slide. So this is so basically the building to grid is essentially the commercial grid, and then the industry to grid, and those two, since there's so many similarities, they meet together and function essentially as one DUG. And the two main outputs of this organization is they're working on this challenges of transactive energy, a white paper for that. And this is something that is getting more and more visibility. We hear people in Congress a little bit, but in Department of Energy and FERC and a lot of others talking about this transactive energy. So we're trying to get a handle on that, and the DUG is the place to help us learn more about this and figure out how we as the SGIP effectively address this particular topic. And the other is working on this white paper dealing with electric storage versus thermal storage, and looking at sort of the features and the benefits, the pros and cons, if you will, of each of those two different technologies for storage. So next is Home to Grid, and this DUG has been extremely active, and as we were making the transition from the first of SGIP that we commonly refer to as SGIP 1.0 over to 2.0, this is one of the Dukes that continue to meet very actively and continue to push this forward, this material forward. So currently they're working on this white paper on the economic value of demand response in the electric energy market, and they hope to have that completed by the end of this year. In addition to that, they're involved with the transactive energy in terms of what it means in terms of residential devices. And they're also investigating home appliances and getting involved with a variety of things, but this Duke, again, has been very active and has produced quite a few work papers. Excuse me, white papers. So next is distributed renewables, generation, and storage. And this is another very, a fairly active Duke focused on distributed generation and storage. And they have several subgroups within this Duke. And two of those subgroups, the subgroup C is coordinating this work with Department of Energy and Department of Defense, specifically in the area of microgrid and microgrid demonstrations, and also developing architectures and models. But the other subgroup, subgroup D, is coordinating development of test procedures and test plans for grid interactive smart inverter functions. And again, as you're involved or exposed to what's going on in the smart grid community, certainly smart inverters is something that more and more people are discussing. So next up is transmission distribution Duke, and this is really ongoing development of transmission bus load model, which is a model for an interface between transmission and distribution systems that facilitates communications between the energy management system of the transmission part of the grid and the distribution management system on the distribution side. It also integrates the DER information, the distributed generation and storage capacity, and load information, as well as other grid conditions and grid monitoring information. It's also working on, in the future it'll be working on alarms and event management over the smart grid. And another thing that's been in the news a lot lately is synchrophasers and looking at the time synchronization and management. And that'll follow some of the work on PAP 13. And then also this group, as we're getting documents prepared and ready for the Catalog of Standards review, this group also reviews those that are specifically related to the transmission distribution grid. So next is business and policy Duke, and this is really focused on higher level policy related issues, examine policy issues related to the green button, which has also been extremely visible, and also engaged in discussions with the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners. And a lot of the work is, a lot of what we do is really related to the utilities implementing the guidelines and other documents that are on the Catalog of Standards. And primarily the way utilities obtain the funding, if you will, to go forward with some of those implementations is through state corporation commissions. So NARUC is the one central body that we can work with that helps to move forward some of those issues, and the SGIP overall just needs to have a close working relationship with NARUC, that as we're developing documents for the Catalog of Standards and working on implementation, that we share that with NARUC to help them sort of speed up the process of implementing these smart grid products and systems. So next is talking about the priority action plans. So, for the novice, I would say this is essentially a project. And the way we handle, the way these projects are sort of created, if you will, is someone or a group of people identify that there's some gap out there related to the smart grid interoperability. And then one person or a group basically volunteers to provide to fill out a document that outlines what is the scope of this issue and how can this issue be resolved with, maybe, developing a standard or developing some sort of guideline. And they come with that idea. There's an actual form to fill out. They come to the technical committee with that form and basically give us an introduction to what the issue is relative to that particular gap, how they feel that creating a PAP might meet the needs of that, might sort of fill that gap, if you will. And then there have been some situations, just to let you know, where somebody's come to the technical committee or the board with an idea, and we've concluded that, well, it's something that should fall under a DUG, or it's something that should be done in a task force, and something that may not fall out necessarily as a PAP. So not everything that comes to us in the concept of a PAP really turns into actually being a PAP. But anyway, once it's approved by the technical committee and then goes to the board and the membership for approval, then that group that proposed it works on specific requirements of what that work is all about. And then they identify a standards development organization or a specifying organization that might be able to do that work, or might already have a standard similar to what we need, but might just not go to the right degree of detail to support the smart grid interoperability. So then that SDO basically goes off and does their work, and then once they come back, then that document is offered, and we go through the catalog of standards evaluation process. And then once that's all done, then basically the PAP comes to us and says, okay, we did all the work that we think we had to do, and we think we're ready to close out the PAP, and then there's a form to do that also. So a lot of this priority action plan area is very well defined, and we've got policies and procedures in place to make sure, hopefully, this all moves smoothly. So there are currently 12 active PAPs, including recently approved PAP 22, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, dealing with electric vehicle fueling and sub-metering. So I'll just go through these PAPs fairly quickly. So one is PAP 2, which is guidelines for assessing wireless standards for smart grid application. And this particular PAP is dedicated to reviewing existing documentation and ongoing work to assess the capabilities and weaknesses of wireless technologies operating in both licensed and unlicensed bands. The PAP is finalizing a publication of NIST 7761 version 2 with guidelines and examples for wireless communication for smart grid application. This effort updates specific sections in the previous guidelines version 1 and provides an assessment of the different types of wireless technologies that can be used across the grid in these different field environments. So next up is PAP 7, which is Energy Storage Interconnection Guidelines. And certainly as we move forward and try, and as the U.S. has energy independence, we're looking at applying wind and solar and other technologies which, good or bad, are fairly intermittent resources, and the only way to utilize, from my perspective, the only way to utilize them effectively is to couple them with storage, so that basically we can get more sort of bang for the buck out of those renewable resources. So this energy storage priority action plan has developed requirements for 2 new documents. One is IEC 61850-90-7, which is information model for advanced DER inverter functions, and the UL 1741, certification requirement decision, certification test for grid and interactive DER, and special purpose DER. So we can go on to the next. Next is priority action plan, and I'm just breezing through these fairly quickly just to give, well, one, just to give you a flavor of what they're all about, and certainly I urge you to go to the sgip.org website if you want to learn some more about these specific PAPs and to get more information on them, or if you want to find out who the chairperson of the group is and actually start getting more involved with some of these PAPs. So the next one, PAP 12, is mapping IEEE 815, which is referred also DMP3, which is sort of an older communication protocol or interchange for distribution systems and substations, and really the conversion, or where does that fit in relative to a more robust IEC 61850. So on this project, 300 comments have been received on the first IEEE 1815.1 ballot, of which it's interesting to note that 111 actually came from European organizations. Almost all comments have already been addressed, and balloting is targeted for September of this year. And then we hope to have a document coming to the technical committee and the SGIP for hopefully balloting and consideration for the catalog of standards later this year. So next is PAP 15, which is Power Line Communications. This PAP enables the development of an interoperable profile containing common features for home appliance applications. The group continues to work with other SGIP working groups and the International Telecommunications Union, the ITU, to review security issues and guidelines for the implementation of low-frequency, narrowband line communications in the smart grid. So certainly this is an important issue relative to different competing technologies in this power line communications area being able to coexist. Priority Action Plan 20 is the green button energy services provider interface. And again, this is something I mentioned earlier that has had a lot of visibility. It's dedicated to the idea that consumers should have easy access to their own energy usage data. This PAP is working with several organizations, including Energy OS, to develop a new tool for the testing of green button download my data. And the tool has been constructed based on the UCA LUG green button test plan and validates data according to the test plan. And it's important to note here that the green button initiative or the green button concept has already been adopted by utilities serving more than 30 million customers. So this has been a huge project for SGIP. And the final priority action plan that I'm going to review here is the brand new one. I think it was approved about 2 months ago, and this is electric vehicle fueling sub-metering requirements. And the impetus for EV fueling sub-metering is driven by the need to provide utilities, energy retailers, other energy service providers the ability to identify, measure, and manage EV charging loads. Also of importance is the capability to provide real-time EV charging electricity usage and cost information to the consumers in a cost-effective and easy-to-understand manner. So this is basically just giving, making sure that the information is available there, making sure that we are metering that load effectively, and able to work with the utilities to come up with rate schedules and costs in order to move this forward. So as I noted as I walked through what the PAP process is all about, the close to the final stage of the PAP process is where the SDOs have been working on these documents, that they bring those documents back to the PAP, and then the PAP evaluates them to see does this document meet all those requirements that the PAP working group had established early in the process. So these are 4 specific documents that are undergoing typically review within the standards development organization. And it should be noted that, as the PAP, we identify the requirements and then we sort of pass them over to the SDO, but then the SDO goes through their normal processes and their normal evaluation and approval process before that document is sort of blessed and then sent back to the PAP working group. So we do rely on the standards development organization to go through their own voting and balloting processes, and sometimes it means that we're sort of waiting as the PAP for those things to come back to us. So these are some of the PAPs that are waiting, or that we're waiting on. PAP 8 is the SIM for distribution grid management. PAP 16 is wind plant communications. PAP 17, facility smart grid information standard, and PAP 19 is wholesale demand response. So I've run through that fairly quickly, but hopefully I've given you a flavor of what is going on. There's just a huge amount of work being done on these technical activities. And before we go on to the next segment, which is for Tariq to give us an update on sort of what does the future hold relative to some of these PAPs or new PAPs. I wanted to open it up to see if there were any questions from people on the line.
Good afternoon, this is Billy, and we have 5 questions, and I'll begin with the first one. How is the NIST effort in developing a cybersecurity framework for critical infrastructure being aligned with the SGIP effort?
So I don't know if, I guess we're in a little bit of a jam because I'm not the technical expert, and Marianne would be able to answer that question, but I'm not sure if she has access to speak. So John McDonald, or does someone else with a more thorough technical knowledge know the answer to that question?
Chris Weir here with you.
Oh, Chris.
Hi. I just wanted to say that Marianne is acting to coordinate our activities across the Smart Grid component with all of the other activities in the executive order. Part of what she's been doing is working with the team that is developing the framework to inject the Smart Grid concerns and specific items. That input is being used to frame the draft executive order. As soon as the draft is available, and it should be available at the end of this month, we're going to alert the Smart Grid community to the opportunity to comment. And we'd appreciate all of you providing some input at that point as well. So Marianne's been helping make sure that the Smart Grid voice gets into the first draft, and you can help in the next phase to make sure that as it's refined and revised, it has the right input.
Thank you, Chris, for bailing me out.
Anytime, John.
What's next?
Thank you. Our second question. Given the North American grid includes Canada, will there be a need for an international agreement between the U.S. and Canada?
Well, this is John, and I don't know the full answer to that, John Caskey, but basically we do have letters of intent with several organizations out there already. We're working on sort of modifying that framework a little bit with MOUs, and certainly Canada has been involved with some of the smart grid efforts. Whether we need a formal process or not to solidify that relationship, I don't know, but John or Patrick may have already given this more thought.
No, this is Patrick Gannon. So let me just address that. You know, today we have, I think, over 20% of our members are from companies and organizations outside the United States, and so we are appealing to an international audience. And while NIST is providing some of the funding for our current organization, we are not, we're majority funded by our members. And so any members can join from any country, and we are encouraging that. So the NIST funding is not a barrier for any other member to join or other country to have representation. Okay. I think there was a question here for John on the technical experts. Do they need to be a member, and how are they identified? I think that was referring to the invited technical experts, John.
Yes, so we don't, to be honest with you, we try and shy away from using this. But as I mentioned, there are some situations where we have a short-term need for a technical expert, and that person is not currently a member of the SGIP. Certainly we try and twist some arms to get them to be a member of SGIP, but if there's a fairly important need of a technical resource that we don't have internally within the membership or a volunteer, then we want, my goal as the chair of the technical committee is to make sure that the work continues forward. So if there's a, say a catalog of standard review or something where we need some technical eyes to look at that for, again, a limited period of time, a month or 2 or 3 or something like that, then we do have a process in place where the person that's running that particular standing committee or PAP or DUG can fill out a form that says that they need a technical person to help out with this particular project, and that they've called for volunteers and they can't get that level of expertise they need internal to the membership, that then they ask to say, well, gee, can I invite this person from a university in to work with us for a few months to get this knocked out, and then that person will sort of terminate their relationship with the SGIP unless they join the SGIP. So we have that process in place. We've just started to get those applications or those requests, and we're just going through the process of evaluating them.
Okay, thank you. John, there was also a question relating to the queue for the catalog of standards, the evaluation queue, and the status of those 160 that was mentioned there. Can you address when that might be published, that queue status for members?
Yes, I can a little bit. That the technical committee, the program management office is really involved with reviewing and keeping up that list of priorities, and then if there are any problems or sort of appeals that develop, then the technical committee will get directly involved with that. But we had briefly gone through that. We had a face-to-face meeting in June. We looked at the priorities at that time, and the ones that were the next 5 or 10 or so, we said, yeah, those are important. They need to go forward, but we need to go back and revisit those priorities. The program management office will be doing that, but unfortunately, I don't know the time schedule. I mean, I expect it to be done within the next couple of months, and then that listing should be available on the SGIP site. So if Susan if she's in a situation where she can talk on the webinar, I mean, she may be able to add more specifics on a time schedule to get those reviews done. So if not, do we want to move on to the next question?
Yes. Okay. The next question was, where is multi-speak in the process of getting added to the catalog of standards?
I know that has been brought to the technical committee in the program management office, but I don't know the resolution of that particular one or when that's going to be brought forward relative to the catalog of standards reviews. So whoever the submitter of that question is, we'll need to get back to them.
Okay, we'll do a follow-up. We have the names of those who asked that question. So I think those are mostly the technical questions we've had so far. I encourage others if you have questions. We're going to go down into the presentation now for Tariq Samad, if we can. And thank you so much, John Caskey, for leading us through that detailed discussion on the technical activities.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So we're very fortunate to have Dr. Tariq Samad. He's a corporate fellow with the Honeywell Automation Control Systems. He was elected to the governing board of the original Smart Grid Interoperability Panel from Category 2 for commercial and industrial equipment manufacturers and automation vendors back when we were originally established, and reelected in 2010 and now in 2013. He's currently a member of the board of directors and serves on the executive committee as the vice chair there. And he's also our liaison for international outreach. He has worked to get established our new International Activities Committee, and we're very, very thankful for that. Dr. Samad is also an active member of the Buildings to Grid, Industry to Grid Domain Expert Working Group, so we're very fortunate. So Tariq, if you'll lead us through this discussion.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm very pleased to be here. Let me start by just recalling back to the beginning of this webinar when John McDonald referred to SGIP progress as moving from phase 2, which is sort of setting up our operational practices, to phase 3, evaluating and initiating new activities. So through the SGIP Technical Committee, which is chaired by John Caskey, whom you just heard from, we've been working with the various SGIP technical groups to identify several important areas where we think SGIP and these groups need to focus on, and with the ultimate objective in all cases, of course, of advancing smart grid standards and interoperability. Some of these activities may lead to requirements, specifications, use cases. Others may lead to new standards. Ultimately, the hope is that most of these activities, one way or another, will result in new entries for the SGIP maintained catalog of standards. One particular way some of these activities could progress would be through new priority action plans, PAPs, which John talked about. But that's not the only way as well. There may be alternative mechanisms that could be used. And the intent for sharing all of these areas with you is really to solicit members' interest in and participation in these activities. And it's by doing so, by participating, that you can help shape the outcome of these all of these. And this is just our first cut at several important activities. It's the result of canvassing all our technical committees and domain expert working groups and PAP groups as well. And there are probably many others as well, and in fact we are particularly interested in new ideas for additional activities from our members, and so please do get in touch with us, and there's going to be email addresses coming up in the next several slides. And I should also point out that in the SGIP newsletter that was just sent out yesterday, this information about all of these topics is included in there, as well as points of contact for questions and expressions of interest. And also, please do use the chat window if you have any questions. We'll be going through a number of technical areas. I'm by no means an expert in all of them. In fact, I'm by no means an expert in any of them. But we'll do the best we can in terms of addressing any immediate questions you have, and we'll get back to you in cases where we can't give you satisfactory answers. All right, so with that, could we move to the next? Stay on this slide. So these are a list of the 8 topics that we will be covering in my presentation, and I'll have a slide on each of these. And in each case, there you will see one or more points of contact listed as well. And again, you're asked to get in touch with these points of contact directly. So let's move on to the next one. So our first new emerging technical activity relates to cybersecurity requirements for 2 ANSI standards. So these are ANSI C12.19, which is Utility and Device Data Tables, and C12.22, which focuses on protocols for interfacing to data communication networks. So the Smart Grid Cybersecurity Committee, which is the committee that's proposing this new activity and has embarked on it, in fact, their proposal is to begin work on a seed document that could ultimately be incorporated within some sort of a deliverable, which could be, for example, an ANSI technical report or a NEMA document or an existing or new ANSI C12 standard. And if appropriate, and whether it's appropriate or not will really be realized through discussions with members who participate in this activity, we could establish a new SGIP priority action plan. And this probably would be particularly important to do if we think some new standard needs to be included or some existing standard needs to be adopted for interoperability in the Smart Grid. So again, this is a Smart Grid Cybersecurity Committee activity. The chair of the Smart Grid Cybersecurity Committee is Marianne Swanson at NIST. You see her email address there, and it's also in the news note that went out yesterday as well. So that was the first item. Let's move on to the next one. And this is in fact also by the Smart Grid Cybersecurity Committee, and Marianne Swanson is the point of contact for this one as well. This one is titled, as you can see here, Cybersecurity Risk Management, Case Study and Training Class. And it builds on a Department of Energy document called Electricity Subsector Cybersecurity Risk Management that was recently published. And based on this report, SGCC, the Cybersecurity Committee, has drafted a case study that walks the reader through a hypothetical utility applying the DOE's cybersecurity risk management process. This, I see a note from an organizer that you can't hear me very clearly. So could somebody respond and say, let me know if it's better now? Can anybody hear me at all?
Yes, we can. Just
yeah, this is John Caskey. I can hear you very clearly.
Okay, all right. So it was John McDonald sending me the note. So John, it's perhaps a problem at your end, I'm glad to say. So continuing on with the cybersecurity risk management. So this project will involve the implementation of Smart Grid Cybersecurity Interoperability Standard. Sorry, I was still on the previous chart, Patrick. Yeah. And helping organizations decide which standards to implement based on their risk profile and the risk sensitivity. So that's what we're looking for a subgroup to help with, to finalize the case study, develop a one-day training class which covers all these items. And again, Marianne Swanson is the point of contact for that. Let's move on to the next one now. This one is on transactive energy, which there's been a fair amount of buzz about recently. And the buzz is really focused on the notion that transactive energy concepts and techniques offer the promise of transactive retail rate design. So rate designs and tariffs that can help realize bilateral transactions, so true bilateral transactions instead of one-way communication between customers on the one hand and energy commodity distribution services providers on the other hand. So these rate designs could communicate prices that reflect costs and at the same time supporting public policy and intelligent energy use. Transactive energy is well aligned with net energy metering and distributed energy as well. In this new activity, SGIP members working through the business to grid, the buildings to grid, and the business and policy domain expert working groups will focus on the business and technical implementation of transactive energy, including its impact on topics like retail cost of service and competitive tariffs. And these would be explored within current regulatory policy using current or new standards. And again, we are seeking the involvement of SGIP members. So there are 3 points of contact here: David Holmberg at NIST, Ram Sastry from Samsung, and Edward Kazalek from TMIX. All right, let's move on to the next one. Sensors for transmission and distribution networks. So as a result of growing renewable energy penetration, distributed generation, and other developments, we are seeing increasing variability of generation and load. And we think this really will require significantly more and better monitoring of transmission and distribution systems by operators. So we will need pervasive deployment of smart grid sensors that can provide the necessary information to allow power system operators to respond rapidly, and also to enable automated response to instabilities before they fully manifest themselves, or while they're still incipient, and which, if fully manifested, could really lead to cascading outages. So the sorts of sensors that are of particular interest here include optical current transducers and clamp-on line sensors. These have the capability to provide real-time measurements. However, right now, although such sensors are available, there's really no established standards, which limits their interoperability in particular, and thereby limits their widespread deployment, which we think is really an urgent need for overall reliability in this case of increasing renewable penetration. So in this activity, SGIP members will help develop requirements for any new standards or extensions to existing standards in order to improve the resiliency and reliability of the future grid as it approaches its new normal of rapidly changing operating conditions. So this is from the transmission and distribution working group, and the point of contact is Jerry Fitzpatrick at NIST. Moving on to the next one. So this is a slightly different nature. It's an area we perhaps have not explored in detail in SGIP to date. However, it is critically important, in particular as more data is communicated and shared in the new smart grid. And so it's about data sharing and usage agreements, and it sort of recognizes that smart grid capabilities depend substantially on information exchanges between organizations. And so the question is, how will these information exchanges be managed? Who is the steward for them? These aspects are really not addressed until later stages of projects. This can lead to delays and hurdles to achieving technical as well as business objectives of all parties involved. SGIP, through the Business and Policy Working Group and the Smart Grid Cybersecurity Committee, is looking to convene an industry group of relevant stakeholders to develop requirements and an agreement framework for data sharing and usage, along with a roadmap for trial and implementation. So activities are already happening in this way. So you all heard about the green button activity, which is really exciting, and certainly there's data sharing and usage aspects and agreement aspects there as well. But it's really a broad area of interest that covers all domains of the smart grid. So points of contact here are Steve Whittegren at Pacific National Northwest Laboratories and Walt Camp at Landis & Gear. Next slide.
Tariq, this is John Caskey. Your voice is tapering off a little bit in some of what you're saying, so please just make sure you speak loudly and talk to wherever the microphone might be.
All right, thank you, John. So right over my computer right now. Hope that's better. Our next one is microgrids. I personally think of microgrids as a particularly hot topic in Smart Grid, and aspects of it are really being pursued in a number of working groups in SGIP. And in particular, the Distributed Renewables Generation and Storage, or DRGS, working group is focusing on microgrid information architectures. And what the DRGS group wants to do, with help from members like you, is to collect and develop use cases for microgrid projects and use these to then define architectures and models for information exchange. And it should be said that this is an international activity, so it's not just limited to microgrids as they might be being implemented or envisioned in the US, but in international locations as well. So it's definitely something that the international scope is particularly important here. And it covers sort of the operational aspects of markets as well, of operational aspects of microgrids, as well as market aspects of microgrid scenarios too. There's also connections with the U.S. Department of Energy and the U.S. Department of Defense that are involved in this activity, and of course in the U.S. These agencies are very heavily involved in microgrid development. So the relevant group is the DRGS Domain Expert Working Group, and the point of contact is Al Hefner at NIST. Let's move on to the next slide. Last year, as some of you may recall, SGIP launched a new priority action plan, PAP21, focused on weather information. And this recognized that weather data is really critical for any number of smart grid applications. So PAP21 was authorized to coordinate the development of weather-related user criteria, relying on inputs and feedback and perspectives from a wide range of stakeholders, which include renewable and distributed energy suppliers, distribution utilities, ISO and RTO markets, and forecasting agencies and forecasters for weather as well. The objectives of this project include a set of information requirements that are designed to facilitate the harmonization of weather-related information models and information exchange models to be used in smart grid applications. So Al Hefner is again the point of contact for this activity. And one other thing I would like to add in the context of PAP21 is that in addition to participation in the PAP in various capacities, we're looking for a technical expert as well that can help lead the work of this PAP. And this would be sort of be a co-chair of the PAP, help drive the technical direction, help facilitate and manage meetings, help in leadership of the reports. So this is certainly a critical PAP for smart grids and for SGIP, and we think this is really an opportunity to make a visible and notable impact for the right person. So in that case too, please do contact Al Hefner if you're interested. Well, not the last slide, but our last topic. And the last one I wanted to focus on is from the Smart Grid Testing and Certification Committee, and it's on testing and certification program. So the objective here is to identify where do we need to focus our testing and certification activities. So the SGTCC is seeking input from all members, and in particular it is seeking input from utility participants and input as well as participations, since these are the purchasers and decision makers for the systems and devices that will be deployed in the smart grid. The idea is for the information that will be gathered to be used to develop something like a top 10 list of testing needs and gaps, and then recommend these to SGIP for action. And deliverables for this activity could include support for industry testing activities, incubation of new testing programs, the development of requirements and test criteria, and potentially new priority action plans where appropriate as well. Some such activities have already started, so examples of testing activity priorities that have been raised so far, and this is by the current SGTCC participants, include home area network interoperability testing and meter security testing programs. So you're asked to contact the chairs of the SGTCC, Dean Prochaska at NIST and Rudy Schubert at NRX. And with that, let's move on to I think it's my last slide. So what I've gone over are a set of 8 areas for new technical activities, or new, or let's say renewed, since some of these were started earlier but they've been in a little bit of a hiatus state, or in some cases the groups have been working along already but they feel they could benefit from additional input and participation from SGIP members. But these are just our first cut at doing these, and this has just been done internally within the technical committee and its various subgroups. So we're quite convinced that our members can help us identify important areas for new technical activities as well. So we're particularly interested in the input from the technical community, from the SGIP community at large, both in terms of your suggestions for new activities that we could send out, perhaps future calls for participation on, as well as perhaps your interest in leading some of these as well. So for these broader questions, please contact me directly. You see my email address there, or contact the SGIP Director of Technical Operations, Susan Hoyler, at sgip.org, as you can see. So that's all I have, and I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Okay, if anyone has any questions for Tariq Samad on his presentation, please post those. I don't see any new ones that have been added, Tariq. We'll give it a minute here and see if there's any new questions that pop up, if anyone has additional questions. Okay, I don't see any new questions, Tariq, specifically on the call for participation. So thank you so much for highlighting those for us. As you mentioned, there's a lot of good opportunities out there for participation, though.
Thank you, Patrick.
Okay, I would like to, there was a question that came in, and so of a more general nature about voting and within the organization, and maybe this is something that John McDonald could address. The question was asking if there are still required meetings and required votes as a condition of maintaining voting rights. And so, John, since you have a greater history of organization of what was done before and what's current, if you would like to provide an answer on that.
You know, Patrick, when we transition over to the member-funded organization, the main thing is that the participating members at the dues level that they've paid have voting privileges. So the need, to do that we had previously, we just don't have that need anymore. So I think the main thing for those participating in a webinar is just to be aware that when you join SGIP and pay your dues, that you have full voting privileges, and we hope you participate as active as you can and really get plugged into the activities that John Caskey and that Tariq have talked about, and that additional activities we'll be talking about for the rest of this webinar. But there is no accounting, like we had before. It's a different organization, different setup, and the main thing is you join as a participating member and you have full voting privileges, and hopefully you're actively involved and voting then on the activities that you're involved with.
Great, thank you, John. There was a second part to that question dealing with voting on board of director elections, and as you know, we just completed our mid-year kind of catch-up elections for only some of the categories. So if you would briefly explain the trade-off in different categories voting at different times here, and the voting we'll have coming up here in the fall elections.
Well, yeah, what we just talked about was, what we just talked about was voting on, voting on work, the work that's being done, work activities. The board elections, we have the stakeholder categories. 23, 23rd is the at-large category, and so we have 23 categories, and either the odd or even come up to vote at any one time. And so with each of the categories of election, there's candidates that are running for the board seat for the 22 categories. For the category 23, there's 3 seats that are open at the at-large category. And all the companies in a stakeholder category that have joined at the participating member level have a vote in that category for a candidate to represent that category on the board. Okay, and so when we have elections, then it's important that the primary contact, or the person that provides us the vote for the organization of the participating member, make sure that they do vote, and then they would vote for one of the candidates that's running in their stakeholder category. So it is different from what we talked about before. But what's important here, I think, bottom line is that we encourage you to join SGIP. We encourage you to join at the participating member level, because then you do have a vote for board of directors elections, as well as a vote on the technical activities that you're involved in.
Thank you, John. And we will be putting out the call for nominations in a couple months for that fall election, so for those categories that are up for that. We had a general question that came in about the slides being available, and the answer is yes. We will be posting those to the website, and we'll send a note to all of those who had registered for this webinar. And as we've done in the past, we should have a link to the video, complete video with the audio voiceover of the slide presentation, as well as a PDF document of all the slides presented. So those of you who want to kind of study some of the slides in detail, there was some that had a lot of detailed information or content on that. So that will be up on our website, as well as an email going out to those who registered to give them that information. That will take a few days, so probably sometime next week we should have that information available there. And let's just check and see any other questions coming in. Okay, there was a question here, and John McDonald, this one may be one to answer here. I'll see if I can. Can SGIP be a clearinghouse for ongoing smart grid funds and research efforts, such as the Ontario Smart Grid Funding Call and the upcoming Ontario Sandbox Testbed Project? Perhaps these could be in the monthly newsletter, as AESP does. So in terms of being a clearinghouse of information, we have tried to make available general information, at least in terms of those activities, with some of our partner organizations, and we are looking at setting up additional news outlets or channels of information so that we can provide such other efforts as that. So we'll take this one as a follow-up offline to the person who asked, and see if there's something specific that we can partner with on something like that.
And Patrick, since the question came up in the Ontario context, I think we could put in a plug for the International Activities Committee as well, or the International Task Force as it was previously called. And we've sort of in the process of restarting that, and this could be one of the items it tries to take under its scope as well, being helping identify opportunities for funding in different regions of the world. And we'll probably have more information on the International Activities Committee in future webinars and in future newsletters.
Yeah, I was going to, and Tariq, there's two other things too. You know, we had a question before that John Caskey answered about, you know, a separate agreement with Canada, right?
Right.
And you know, as John said, you know, we've worked together, right, with folks from Canada that are involved with our work activities. But I guess, you know, you know, Tariq, the International Activities Committee would welcome. I mean, if there was a core group of Canadian representatives that had some specific, you know, ideas, you know, joint workshops like we did with Korea last December, or specific work items to do between SGIP and the Canadian organization, we welcome the opportunity, you know, to discuss with Canada more of a formal arrangement through the International Activities Committee, right, to formalize and prioritize some specific work efforts. So that's something that, you know, if there is interest from the Canadian group, please, you know, talk to Tariq, and we would welcome those discussions. I think the other thing with respect to the clearinghouse, Patrick, is we should remind folks too that DOE has funded now for several years the Virginia Tech Research Institute as the Smart Grid Clearinghouse for information regarding funding projects, particularly, you know, projects, research, all kinds of information, and that's an open, you know, website that anyone can go to. So we don't want to, you know, we or anyone else shouldn't duplicate the efforts that Dr. Saifer Rahman has done in building that clearinghouse at the Virginia Tech Research Institute. So we should point folks to that and possibly consider the Ontario information, you know, if it's not there already, that maybe that, you know, that would be a good place for it, and we could link, you know, to that site.
Excellent. Thank you very much, John. Are there any other questions anyone has that they want to put forward, type in? Okay, I don't see any new questions coming up here, so let me quickly wrap up this webinar session. We want to thank all those who have attended and registered here, and remind folks of the upcoming activities. We opened up the registration for the SGIP's inaugural conference. This is being held in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. November, actually we published it as November 5th through the 7th, but it turns out we will be having a number of member meetings and tutorials on the Monday the 4th. So actually there'll be pretty much 4 full days of activities there from the 4th through the 7th. And so we invite members and non-members to register to attend. It will be held at the PGA National Hotel. Very limited facility, but also has a lot of meeting rooms, so it was one of the more functional sites that we were able to have in that particular area. And we are teaming up with NEMO's having their Illuminations conference weekend on the Friday and Saturday, immediately following our conference. So we invite you to take a look at that. The registration page is open. You can register both for attending the conference, as well as there's a link there for registering at the hotels. They have a limited block of rooms. The block of rooms will be available through September. The early bird registration prices are through September for this conference. So we invite all members and non-members to attend this event. There'll be a great deal going on. We'll have both keynote speakers as well as technical tracks and business tracks going on. So there'll be a lot for everyone, as well as just the face-to-face networking that happens among this smart grid ecosystem. Also, our next webinar e-meeting will be held on the 26th of September, same time period from starting at 1 p.m. Eastern time. And so we ask people to be sure to put that in your calendars. We'll be sending out notices as we get closer to that date in September. But at least block that out, and we invite you to join us in that call. We'll have further updates on the activities, not only the technical activities, but hearing from some of the groups that have been producing some great results here. Looking forward to that. Thank you all for attending, and we're so glad to have you participating and supporting the SGIP. And thanks again to the presenters here for being a part of this, for John McDonald and Chris Greer, John Caskey, and Tariq Samad. Thank you all very much.